Welcome back to another episode of Fishing Without Bait, where we're having our continuing conversation with our new friend, Nick. These experiences, there's a line in the AA book, the 12-step book, that says, the alcoholic knows loneliness like no other. So could you share with us what you feel comfortable with about that, Nick?
Yeah, certainly. And I can share that being from Sweden, we are quite socially distanced already. Being then an introvert as well, on top of that. I was very shy, at least as a teenager and so on. I was very shy, very quiet, always preferred to be alone. And that didn't then work for me. However, once I found alcohol, I realized that changed me. It changed me and I became an extrovert. It served me from some time and it put me in positions which I normally wouldn't have ended up, like being a president of a golf club, the captain of a golf team, because I would be the one to do the presentations and so on. And I could do that when I was still drinking. But these days I'm more withdrawal. I more enjoy, reading, writing, and so on. And I'm not lonely when I'm by myself these days as I was then. And but that time I remember when I was still drinking, I could sit in a bar drinking but feeling very lonely and isolated. And I don't feel like that these days. So it has all changed, and I'm much more connected with myself and with the people around me these days.
Yes, as a alcoholic, what I call in full bloom with the addictive mind, we can sit in let's say, a soccer stadium with 150,000 people and be the loneliest person in there.
Yeah, I felt that.
So your personal experiences put you in a unique position to carry a message to other people. How did that help you write your international best-selling book, Executive Loneliness, Nick?
Yeah, so about 1 year into my recovery, I was feeling great. I had lost all the additional weight I put on, and I was sober for a year. I had repaired my relationships. I'd come enough in the program to make amends and healed my relationships. And perhaps I had the best relationship already with my parents that I ever had in my adult life. So everything was looking great. But then suddenly, sadly, I lost a friend of mine, a male friend of mine, to suicide, and that changed everything, because until that moment I have kept my recovery quite secret in this bubble, sort of, with a doctor, a few close friends and so on, who knew what was happening. But with my friend and gone to suicide, I decided to open up. And what I did then was I became a volunteer and a fundraiser to a suicide prevention agency in Singapore. With that, I made a social media post then about my friend's suicide and asked people to, share the post and chip in some money and support for the cause. What I didn't realize was that this was touching a lot of hearts, and the post went viral. And within 24 hours, I was on TV, radio, newspaper, and so on all around the world. Journalists was writing in as they wanted to hear more about this story, and that was where it all started. So before I knew it, then the next step was that many organizations, including men's organizations, women associations, chambers of commerce, and so on, they invited me to give my keynote. And then the world fell in a pandemic, and we had all the lockdowns. So we had the all hands meetings on Fridays when the staff, they need to gather and they want to talk about loneliness and isolation. And I was the perfect speaker. And then it tipped over again when it was November, the campaign for November then, where I was speaking almost every day, sometimes 2, 3 times a
Oh,
day
wow.
online, giving this story. And that's when everyone said, Nick, you got to write a book about this. You got to write a book about that. So that's when it started during that time.
Well, what it says in the 12-step book, and in the second chapter, is there is a solution, so you don't have to wait until the end. And it says, we have written this book to show you precisely how we have recovered. And what you did, I think, was exceptional, exceptional. So I'm not much into finding out how things went wrong. Uh, let's say at the Ford Motor Company, when some car doesn't come out exactly correct and they go back through every stage of the assembly line, the processing process, will go back to the manufacturing plant, all that. I'm not interested in that. When things go well, Nick, I'm interested in finding the person, places, things, and situation that worked and add to and reinforce those. And it sounds like that's what your book's about.
Yes, it certainly is about that. I mean, first it's about taking ownership for what was and the acceptance, but then moving on to the future path, and that's where I'm at these days, and that's what I do now for a living as a coach and therapist. Soon also to be a therapist this year, I should say, and it's helping others then on that path, and it is by connection to ourselves, connection to other people, and then also as many men I'm working with who are wondering what's my purpose in life, what's the legacy I want to write, and take them through those deep questions because many of them have never been thinking about that. And it's about they are getting more aligned in living the life that you want to live. And that starts by having some open and honest conversations.
I think that's wonderful. I have a tattoo on my arm that says no regrets. I always thought that the perfect cemetery, every tombstone would have the epitaph, no regrets. That's all I usually ask people, Nick, if they say, well, gee, I don't know whether to apply for this job. I don't know whether to get back together with this person. I'll ask them, would you regret it if you didn't? And if they say yes, and I said, there's your answer. We don't need to discuss this any further. So could you, I don't think many people would grasp the term executive loneliness. Could you tell us about that?
Yeah, I love to do that. And as I was then starting to talk about the concept of isolation and loneliness in the workplace, I was doing some research to think what term can I use for this, the project and so on. It was Forbes magazine that came up with it the first time when they were describing the isolation in the workplace, and typically then someone who is trying to drive themselves, often a perfectionist, and many times perhaps an anxious overachiever who is inside the workplace to prove to themselves and prove to the world that they are a high achiever, and therefore isolating themselves and not being vulnerable and not being open. That was the definition basically of an executive loneliness. And I took that term and I called the campaign Race to the End of an Executive Loneliness, is what the campaign for the Suicide Prevention Agency
Ah,
was called. And that's what the book became also the title later on, simply for the reason that if we can eliminate that, if we can feel more connected inside the workplace and discuss the challenges we have, then we don't have to go and drink or drag on them or do some other addictions outside, which is what I had to do. It was just so challenging for me to be at work. I couldn't wait for the minute when I could rush out the door to, yeah, release that pressure over a drink.
well, we always need something to fill the void, Nick, after we've eliminated alcohol from our life because when we're doing that, it takes you got a lot of time on your hands after you put that over. Tell me how you address that.
Yeah, so what I did in sobriety was, of course, what we all ask to do is by giving back and helping others. And I do that still today very actively in the 12-step community. Doesn't matter where I am in the world, I plug into them and I try to be there to help others, sponsor others, and support others. But what I also found was as I kept having these presentations, especially to the business community and so on about loneliness, of course, not everyone could feel that they could understand me then having an alcohol issue. They almost turned around and said, Nick, you're so fortunate that you had an alcohol problem, so you found a group for you. But where should I go? I don't have any alcohol issues, but I still need a place where I can be vulnerable. I also have life issues. I need to talk to other people. So what I did then was to found a men's group. So I'm running a men's group now, where we go on online. We do it on Zoom because many are business people traveling, but we log on and we share. Every week is a different topic. This week was relationships, like wife, girlfriend relationships. Other weeks it can be about nutrition, sleep, or it can be about parents. So it can be any topic that we can discuss together just to practice our vulnerability and to get closer to each other. So that's what I'm passionate, and that's what I've done with my time. It's about giving back and feeling plugged in and connected.
Gratitude's an action word, Nick.
There we go.
Yes. So tell us about as a person rises through the corporate world, the expectations, I would suspect, become exponentially more.
Yes, they do. With every promotion, you get more lonely because you get less people at your level. If you're a middle level manager, in a big office, you might have 20, 30 people at your level. But then as you get a promotion, perhaps to the next level, then it's 3 or 4 people at your level. And then if you are the managing director or CEO at that level, then you have no one in your office at your level. And also, as the corporate world is set up, typically you move to an office. And I remember when I got one of my promotions, I moved into a big corner office and I felt further and more isolated away from my team. I used to sit closer to them, be closer with them. And that's maybe why these days we see more open office spaces and so on. But that wasn't the case at least 10 years ago where I was working. And therefore, with every perk that I got, every promotion I got, I just started to get more isolated and lonely. And also people distance perhaps themselves because they now know that you are in a position where maybe they are not also comfortable to be sharing everything with you. So that you really have to be quite proactive and a leader to connect with them more proactively than what I did. But the culture of the companies where I worked was to keep the distance.
Yes, and I would imagine that leaders were expected not to show vulnerability.
Yeah, absolutely. They were not expected. My boss were not vulnerable with me, so why would I be vulnerable with her?
Yes, well, at times people view vulnerability as weakness.
Yeah, we need to be careful also. I mean, there's the part of oversharing and being over vulnerable. I think it's not wise for anyone to come in and overshare all the personal details, what is happening in their life, the challenges they have. But I do believe that we should be open and we should be vulnerable about the challenges we are facing related to the workplace, the tasks that we are struggling with, rather than keeping it secret and trying to grind through it or trying to cover up a mistake. Take ownership for that mistake and talk to your colleague, a supervisor, or someone, and share the stress and the challenges you are facing and ask for support and help. Most people will understand and appreciate that you're open and that you are admitting that you're only human at the end of the day, and then they will help you. And that is not something that I did, and that was not what people were doing in my workplace, but that is what I do these days.
It's perfectly fine to say, I don't know as an answer.
Yeah.
And people generally shy away from that because then they'll give the impression to others that they're incompetent and can't handle it. So one of the other things that we wanted to talk about was the societal definitions of masculinity. We hear about all this alpha male things. We hear about all of this type of stuff. Tell how that impacts the mental health, particularly of executives.
Yeah, I think that's tough also. I think there's so many expectations and pressures, perhaps, how we're supposed to be. And if you ask me how we're supposed to be, is to be authentic and be our true self and be the person we want to be as much as we can and show up at the places where we want to be. And that for me then means showing up sober as a start. That's where everything starts for me, because I'm not myself if I'm under influence. I have over time now shown up at the right places as I'm sober for a few years now.
Well, a big part of life, Nick, is showing up. And we'll be coming back next week We'll be coming next week to continue this conversation with Nick. And I know you're waiting for a free prescription. It's fruits, nuts, and vegetables. Unplug your television and take up fishing. And for a truly mindful experience, try to fish without bait. Do a kindness for yourself and do a kindness for another. Forgive yourself and forgive another. If we're all not the Creator's children, and none of us are, till all are free, none are free. Namaste.
Please check out our website at fishingwithoutbait.com, where you can listen to the show, comment on our discussions, and find out where you can subscribe to our podcast. If you're interested in flying the colors of Fishing Without Bait, click the shop icon on our website. We have clothing, mugs, cell phone cases, and so much more. Show the world that you fish without bait. This show is a member of the Sorgatron Media Podcast Network. Find out more at sorgatronmedia.com.